Hello, good morning, and welcome to our third video for this Mental Health Awareness Week of a fresh look at mental health. And I'm really pleased to have Frank and Harriet, two of my dear friends, with me to talk today a little bit more around this topic. And what we thought we'd kind of sort of continue the exploration into the sort of way that we are working as human beings and where our experience of well-being comes from. And we thought we'd talk a little bit maybe about how kind of we might have all, I suppose the traditional, the conventional way of thinking is that there's strategies and tools. You know, you've got to, I know as being depressed and having that label on myself, as we talked about yesterday, kind of I've got lots of tools and tricks. Well, I know what should be able to help me feel better. I know what other people think should try and help me feel better. But when I've tried them in the past, it hasn't always worked, or maybe it's worked a little bit, and not another time when I really wanted it to work. But it's kind of been kind of exploring that. And I'll pass over to you, Harriet.
Thanks, Bron. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for inviting me. So prior to coming to the three principles understanding, I had tried all manner of tools and techniques in various parts of my life, partly like the obvious bit of trying to feel better about life, but also as a parent, and also in my work, just sort of trying to do better and come over better, and but kind of thinking more about sort of, I suppose, my like personal development. Even that word alone, that I was really into personal development and self-help, and tried all kinds of things and did various trainings and things, and I can see that was I can see why I did it, and but I can also now see why that stuff didn't work. And I got locked into lots of frustration because I don't want to sort of diss anyone's technique or modality, so I won't mention anyone's in particular. But there was one particular technique that I'd trained in, and I was really committed to, and I thought it worked quite well. But actually, what I can see now was that it did create a lot of frustration because it only sometimes worked. And then I had a whole lot of thinking about. But I'm not doing it well enough, or I'm not doing it enough. I don't understand enough about it. And then I would inevitably get to a point where I thought, well, the reason it doesn't work for me is because I'm actually broken. I'm actually broken and actually can't be fixed. And so it kind of served to separate me from other people in a way that really didn't help my mental health or my mental well-being. And when I first came across the three principles, I think the first thing I heard was, there's nothing to do. And as a busy mum, a busy working mum, with a husband that commutes, that was like, great, there's nothing to do and I can feel better. That's what I want. And I think it resonated somewhere as truth inside me. I kind of heard, that sounds like that's true, but it did also sound a bit like, you know, it's impossible, a bit too good to be true almost. But now, sort of a couple of years down the line, I really do see that there really is nothing to do, and that all those tips and tricks and techniques and strategies actually were only ever going to help me cope with my thinking, and they were actually made up of thinking themselves, and it was just trying to manage and cope. And I'm much more interested in thriving and flourishing and, you know, being me than I am in coping with being me. And that's yeah, I mean, it's just been incredible. And I guess during this conversation we'll probably talk a bit more about, you know, how that happens and how that unfolds. But I guess for now, just to say that I think all the techniques came from a place of seeing myself as broken, And so they couldn't possibly really work. They could only ever be about coping. And now seeing myself as whole and fine and with innate well-being, I don't need them.
That was that was lovely, Harriet. I was thinking, what's left to say? I guess my story is similar without the children. I've spent most of my life, I guess, trying to be a better me, which kind of implies that I wasn't too happy with the me I already was. So yeah, I've been a self-help junkie and have read probably a few hundred books and spent a large amount of money on numerous courses, all of which have ultimately kind of left me feeling that I'm still inadequate, in the sense that, you know, other people seem to have done great things with whatever I've just read about, but it hasn't really changed me in a way that I was hoping it would. This is different for me because for the first time, I no longer feel like there is a gap. There is not some hole I'm trying to fill. I kind of have looked behind the curtain, and it's so much clearer to me how it all works, and that just feels, it feels really simple but life-changing, in the sense that, you know, it sounds kind of crazy when you sit there and say, well, you know, there's nothing to fix. I mean, I heard people saying that for years, and I thought, you know, you're deluding yourself. So I'm one of those people that's deluding myself, except that it doesn't feel that way. And I don't believe it is that way. I believe that the delusion works the other way around, that we kind of take on all this thinking from when we're a baby as we grow up, and we kind of inhabit this idea of ourselves that we've constructed from, you know, judgments that we've made or people have shared with us, our parents, our school teachers, our friends, and we kind of step into this idea of who we are, which isn't us. And that idea, if it's one that makes us feel pretty miserable and hopeless and stuck, is kind of ultimately, you know, no recipe to flourish or have a fulfilling life. I've been around this understanding for several years, and it's really only recently that I've got to really kind of see the truth in what we're talking about. I don't believe it does take that long for everyone. I think a lot of people get it much more quickly than I do, but I think I was kind of so wedded to how I thought this change would happen that, you know, people said it's an understanding, but I thought it was a doing. I was tied up with trying to work out what is it that everybody's doing but never talks about that they're doing. They keep saying there's nothing to do. Anyway, that was a long share, but it has been transformational for me.
I think the thing is, you were talking, Frank, I was listening, and I love that bit about when we know a bit, when we see more clearly who we are, we feel better. When we see the truth that we're not broken. I think Dr. Bill Pettit, you know, never broken, nothing lacking. I love that. And when I could see that to be true about myself, that made a big difference. But I think the other bit about all the tools and techniques is that, again, that's based on a misunderstanding that's pretty key to all of this. So if I think that what's outside of me has power to make me feel good or bad, then I'm going to look to tools and techniques outside of me to make myself feel better. So if it looks like, you know, I don't know, going for a walk every day is going to make me feel better, I'm going to go for a walk every day, and beat myself up on the days when I don't, or get upset when the day I've gone for a walk and it didn't make me feel better. That's going to be confusing and frustrating. And I think for me, that was my experience. A lot of the techniques was that they were trying to fix me from the outside, even when they looked like they were kind of inner techniques, if that makes sense. But so for me, the other, you know, as well as seeing myself more clearly, seeing how the system operates more clearly has really changed things. So understanding that it's my thinking about what's going on outside of me that has the impact on me means that there just isn't so much need for techniques. Like there is no technique that's going to change my thinking, but other than just letting go of my thinking, or just noticing, oh, I'm obviously thinking some stuff about that because I'm feeling bad in some way. So that getting that picture of actually it's an inside out world has been really, really key to me to feeling more connected with my own mental health and to supporting other people's mental health.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I think for so long, like I heard that your thinking is what's causing you to feel a certain way, and I understood that, but I thought the answer, and I think a lot of the tools and strategies I've come across support this, is that, well, if you just change your thinking, so there's a lot of interest in the thinking, whereas now what I see is that it's so much more interesting, the fact that we think and that actually there's thoughts all the time. And I love the sort of like the metaphor of us being the sky, you know, or like the sky is there all the time, but stuff happens in front of it, you know, weather happens, birds fly, things come and go all the time. And I love seeing how thoughts are like that in my sky of me being okay, you know, my well-being, is that stuff comes in and out and it never actually touches or changes who I am. But what I can do is grab onto it and try and keep it like a beautiful sunset. You know, it's like, oh, imagine if the sky looked like that all the time. You try and grab onto it rather than, okay, well, enjoy it while it's here, and then it's gonna, or not if it's a storm, but you know, it's here and it's gonna change. And I think that's been really key for me to see, is that yes, our thinking plays a part, but rather than delving into that, I mean, the amount of deep work I've done, like I can give you a reason for everything in my past that's led me to where I am now, but it's all gone, and the only way it kind of lives on is through me generating a thought about it and getting attached to that thought. But I have millions of thoughts all the time. I don't get attached to the thought of what I'm going to have for breakfast or what I'm going to wear, or you know, there's 1,000 thoughts that happen all the time that I don't pay any attention to, but there are some obviously that you sort of jump on and you attach meaning to it. And I think that's been really interesting, is actually seeing, well, isn't it so interesting, and how clear it is to me now that actually it's just energy kind of going in and out and in and out, and there's nothing to do. I can't change them. I tried that for a long time. And I thought there was something, like you said, Harriet, I thought there was something wrong with me. It was just more evidence of me being completely messed up, was that I couldn't change my thoughts. I couldn't manifest what I wanted. I obviously wasn't focusing on the positive things like I should be, you know? So I think that's been quite lovely to see. It's quite a relief, actually.
That's a really good point, Ron. I think a lot of people kind of hear this initially as, you know, it's your thinking, stupid, sort your thinking out. You know, I hear it as a kind of call to, so, okay, I understand that how I'm feeling is arising from what I'm thinking. So all I need to do is sort out what I'm thinking and I'll feel great all the time. No, that's not what this is saying. It's saying, yes, what you're feeling is coming from what you're thinking. But the kind of the shift that makes the difference is recognizing that it is just your thinking, not the content of your thinking, but the fact that you think. And I heard that over and over again for quite a long time before it finally, oh, okay, there's a subtlety in there that is enormous. Yeah, it changes your relationship with your thinking. Your thinking becomes kind of what's passing through rather than something that's informing you about what's important in the world. And that shift, that starting to recognize that what you thought was solid and meaningful is actually transitory, is passing through, and that you're actually habitually choosing certain things to make a big deal, take seriously. Whereas starting to just realize that you've got all sorts of thinking, most of which you don't take seriously. But there are certain things that you believe are true, and you hold those thoughts close to you, and that creates the world in which you live. And that's why this is so powerful, because once you start to realize that what you're taking seriously is the experience you get, the thoughts that you take seriously are what's giving rise to your experience, then all of it starts to become lighter. It all starts to become less serious. It all starts to move towards the possibility of playfulness with life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Frank. I love that. Sorry, Bron, you go. I just wanted to say I love that.
No, it was lovely, and made me think of something we touched on before. And I was like, okay, so when I first started hearing people talk about this, I was like, okay, but how? Yeah, but how? So I don't know if you want to, you know. And it's so funny because we all just want to know how to do it, and it doesn't seem like there's a way of not figuring it out. Do you want to talk to that a bit, Frank?
Yeah, I will, because it was the question that kept coming back for me. And, you know, I see lots of people struggling with the same thing. People trying to say, but what is it you're doing? So what is the, you know, what are the invisible steps that you won't tell me about? What's the secret to this? Those are all the sort of things that I guess the best I can do on that is to say that if you start to just consider the possibility that what you're experiencing is just a version of what's possible. Because you're thinking, if you're thinking a situation leads you to feel sad. I lost my partner of 28 years in September. And it was a big wrench. We weren't expecting her to go. You know, I'd only retired about a year before, and we thought we had a long and happy retirement ahead of us. And there was certainly no kind of early warnings that it would all change very quickly. But one of the things that kind of came out of that for me was that I moved from having, you know, a partner that I was with much of the time, to having, you know, an empty house and not too many friends, because you know, a lot of the friends that we had were her friends, and I was spending a lot of time on my own, and I was feeling lonely, and that's kind of understandable, and I was feeling, you know, I feel in effect kind of sorry for myself that I was on my own. But what occurred to me at some point, as a result of just being less kind of attached to my thinking, was that was just my thinking too. That because there was nobody around at a given point, that automatically meant that I should feel lonely. You know, because I knew my psychology, we'd evolved, we are people, you know, we need human contact. Now, all of that's true, but I also realized that that feeling was just coming from thoughts that I was thinking, oh, I'm on my own, it might never change. I don't know how to go out and meet new people. There was a whole series of things that I was just kind of adding on to just feeling a little bit low at a particular point. And when I started to realize that that was something that was just coming from all these other thoughts that I was kind of just engaging with, it started to open up for me. It started to shift. And that just really isn't something that I get caught up in now. I recognize that thought train just didn't head anywhere that was helpful to me. And that's been really, really helpful, because I ended up thinking about it more clearly. It's enabled me to do things, to meet new people, to make new connections, to get back into life. And it could have been very different. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but I think you just need to kind of begin to hold the question, is it possible that what I'm feeling is just a story, in effect, that I'm taking seriously?
Yeah, that's just, it's so, I don't know, it just offers so much peace and hope, doesn't it, that question? And I think, like, when you do, I think what I've found is when you open yourself up to that possibility, you kind of make space for other things to come through. So, and like maybe it might pop into your head to do something, or reach out to someone, or to do something that is right for you in that moment, you know? Yeah. So it's not a case always of, and I'm very aware that people listening might be hearing, well, there's still nothing to do, and it's not like you're just sitting there waiting for things to change on their own. It's when you open up that question and that opportunity, like it might come to your mind to go for a walk, or to pick up the phone to phone someone, or to go to the doctor and say, I'm having a hard time sleeping, or whatever it looks like to you, but it's coming from you and your innate health and well-being and wisdom, rather than it being something that somebody else has said might help you.
Yeah.
I think that's really big, because I think that is where there's a lot of innocent misunderstanding, because in the moment wisdom might say, I don't know, ring a friend, and then so you ring a friend, you have a great conversation, you feel a bit better, and so then it looks like every time you feel bad you should ring a friend.
Yeah.
And like, there's nothing wrong with ringing friends, that's not going to do any harm, but that could be a different technique or a different tool, and then that can create frustration, because you think, oh yeah, when I feel bad I ring friends, and you ring a friend, and then that doesn't help, and you feel frustrated, and that's because it's not come from that fresh wisdom. So in that new moment of feeling a bit low, there might be something else that would help in that moment. Or similarly, I mean, like a common one is diet. So lots of people have, it seems like, there's 59 different diets you could pick from, different nutritional plans, and some work for some people and some work for other people. And actually what I see is that some work for me one day and not another day. Like I want to eat certain food one day and not another day. And actually if you followed a prescribed thing every time, that probably wouldn't give you the nutritional benefits of following your taste and your energy levels and your inner wisdom of like, oh, I need a bit more carbs today, or I need more fruit today, or it could be anything. But when we follow that wisdom, then we will find the stuff that's most personalized to us. Like it's the personalized prescription, if you like, of what's going to help in a moment. But I think the other thing is, for me, is that somehow seeing that there's nothing to fix in the moment. And like, so yeah, it's great to have a personalized prescription, but that those are poor words, because that kind of implies that there's a need to move from one state of mind to another. And actually there is no need to move from one state of mind to another. It's all made up anyway, the idea of better or worse. And I think that's been really, really impactful for me, is kind of it's just seeing how often I assign a judgment to that's better than that, that's worse than that, that's good, that's bad. And that could be my kids' behavior, that could be work that I'm doing, that could be my relationship with my husband, or it could just be internal. It could be, oh, I shouldn't have those thoughts. It's all the shoulds and ought tos, and it's really interesting just to notice them, not to do anything about them. So there isn't, there probably are techniques out there of like, if you say a should, you must say 5 positive things about yourself. I don't know, there'll be techniques to address shoulds and coulds, and but actually for me, just noticing, oh, that's a should, it looked real for a minute, but actually it's just a should. Or that looked real for a minute, but actually that was me judging something as better than something else.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because as I was just thinking, like, it still feels like this judgment, isn't it? Like we should be trying to move from one place to another, but it's not like that. And actually now, if something comes into my head that actually I just want to sit down and read a book, or I don't want to go and play, I don't want to go and do this, and like I'm much more okay, well that's just where it is right now, and that too will pass. But now, whereas before I'd be like, oh come on, you've got to do this, you've been so useless, you've been so lazy, you've been so this, you've been so much judgment, like you said, so much judgment all the time, isn't it? You've got to move from one state to the next, one thing to the next. Frank?
One of the things that I think it's worth pointing out is that this, what is there to do, it's like every other thing that I've read about that's been trying to help me, it's always about more doing. It's always in some way that I've got to learn something, practice something, meditate. The whole world is about adding things, and a lot of our shoulds and so on end up being kind of out of all of these books about if only we did more of this or less of that or whatever. One of the things I think that's really different about this understanding is that it's subtractive. It's about kind of having less and less to do, and less that it seems necessary to do. And that's not just about the self-development stuff, it's also about that day-to-day experience, because a lot of those thoughts about what we should be or shouldn't be or ought to or need to, and all of that stuff is just thought. And when you start to kind of realize how much of that is running your life or making you feel bad about yourself or even good about yourself, that whole stuff is it just weighs on you. It takes mental bandwidth. It stops you kind of being as aware as you could be of the world in which you're living in, your connection with your family and friends and children and so on. When you start to see how much thinking you're doing that you somehow or other adopted because you thought it was going to be helpful, once you start to realize how much of that is kind of just taking up space in your head, then it starts to fall away, because once you kind of notice it, you think, why am I thinking that? Why am I paying attention to that? And as you start to kind of see it for what it is, it no longer makes sense. And it's not something you have to practice. It's like if you keep hitting yourself on the head with a hammer, but you're not noticing, once you realize, oh, that's why I've got a headache, you just stop hitting yourself with a hammer.
But I think also, if I may, sometimes I do carry on hitting myself with a hammer, but I know it's a hammer and I know I'm doing it. And that feels really key to me, to the playfulness. Yeah. So, I mean, it could be anything, like, pigging out on chocolate. Like, I now see that for what that is. It's like I'm attempting to make myself feel different. And I've made up that chocolate will make all the difference for me. But sometimes I'm just going to hit myself with a chocolate-shaped hammer. and that's fine. And there's a playfulness to it. I know it's not going to make a difference. I always laugh. There's this little shop in the town where I live. It's really beautiful. And it sells sort of exquisitely beautiful vintage things like tea towels and like knickknacks for the home. And like whenever I go there, I kind of become overcome with this. If I only had that tea towel, my whole life would be different. And it, like that kind of thinking, it's really obvious that a tea towel is not going to change my life. And like that's really obvious that that's outside in thinking. That's thinking that tea towel in the outside is going to impact how I feel on the inside. But actually, I do that on numerous other things that look much more real. Like I can see that a tea towel isn't from this particular shop isn't going to change my life. But actually, I have a lot of thinking about, well, if my children behave better, I would be okay. Or if I earned a bit more money or had a better job or bigger house or like all of those things. But again, even that looks like, yeah, that's like it would be better if my kids behave better. But that really does look real sometimes. But actually unpicking that and seeing that can't have an impact on the inside of me. And that is all based on judgment. And then even more internal, it looks real that if I'm happier, that's better. But actually I've made up what happiness is, and I've made up what that means. Like a happier person is a good person, a better person. So I kind of like, there's layers and layers and layers of stuff I've made up. And that I can remember there was a moment in the understanding where I suddenly thought, whoa, that just sounds like a lot to kind of get my head through and like get through all those layers. But actually where I'm at with it now is that it's really playful. It's really fun just to ask myself those questions. Is that real or have I made it up? Like I'm asking that of myself the whole time now. And that's where the playfulness comes from. And also seeing I don't have to do anything about it, not just because it doesn't look like to me that there is anything I can do about it, but also because it's fine as it is. And it is fine to be hitting myself in the head with a hammer. Until I stop doing it, and that may or may not happen. I may or may not stop hitting myself with a hammer. But when I see it's a hammer, I've got a choice, and a lightness to it, and even a playfulness to it. which to me feels like that's where it's at after years of kind of feeling anxious and depressed at times and a lot of worry, and to be playful is, to me, is everything. So that's properly fun, to live a playful life.
I love that. Thank you, Harriet. That was gorgeous. And probably a good place for us to start rounding things up. Frank, have you got anything you want to say before we go?
I guess the main thing I would say is that if you get any kind of sense that there's something in this, then follow it. I don't know exactly where it will lead you, but it does transform lives. You know, circumstances for many people don't really change, but their joy of life comes back. And when your joy of life comes back, very often circumstances just start to change along with it.
Oh, that made me feel all emotional. Here. Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Harriet. Always a joy to talk to you. And thank you to those of you who've listened and watched. We'll be back for another one tomorrow, and we'd love to hear from you, if you know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your thoughts are. So, you know, we're on Facebook, we're on everything at the moment. A fresh look at mental health. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.